three. And good afternoon, producer Susan. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Jersey Joe. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. So you just learned that batteries don't charge unless you plug the charger into the wall. Did you just learn that lesson now?
Yeah, the dog is known to unplug things out of the wall.
All right. Well, you want to hear what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, what's on the agenda?
Well, if we can fit it all in, we got a bunch of stuff. I didn't intend for it to come out this way, but it turned out to be a very gun-centric show with the shootings in Kansas City and a bunch of other things, and a couple of studies I ran across, and a shooting in Denver. So this is going to be a very gun-centric show. So so it's the Jersey Joe show. Today's February 20th. It's a week after the shooting in Kansas City at the Chiefs Super Bowl victory parade. And it's news and perspective you won't hear on TV, and a lot of what we're going to talk about today you didn't hear about on TV. So keeping with this gun-centric theme today, you can hear a quote from Senator Joseph Biden in 1985, what he said about the topic of criminals and gun controls. And the stupidest thing I've heard all week, we have two contenders you get to pick. The first is about a proposal from a California congresswoman about raising the minimum wage to a number that's way, way above $15 an hour. And the second is about a woman in New York City. I'm actually going to play a clip who got scammed out of $50,000. Now, people getting scammed out of $50,000 is not that, unfortunately, not unusual. But when you hear what this woman does for a living, you're going to be very, very surprised what her profession is and how she got scammed out of $50,000. We're going to play an audio clip. 2 years ago, in 2021, the state of Ohio became the 26th state to legalize what's known as constitutional carry, which is you don't need to get a piece of paper from the state to allow you to carry a concealed weapon. What those states have done, they said, hey, basically, here's the requirements for you to carry a gun, a concealed weapon. And if you meet these criteria, you don't need a piece of paper from us saying that you qualify. And if you don't qualify, you can't carry. Basically you have to be a citizen, no felony records, not under a restraining order. So anyway, the predictions, like in most states, when they say we're going to go with what's called constitutional carry or permitless carry, all the mayors and the Democratic oh no, every time there's a dispute over a parking spot, there's going to be a shootout. Well, we're going to tell you what happened in Ohio. We're also going to tell you what happened to a black Harvard professor who published a study showing that there was no racial bias in the frequency rate of police shootings. In other words, how frequently they shot white suspects versus black suspects, and what happened to him after he published his study. In a story I guarantee you didn't hear in the news, we'll tell you about how old. There was a shooting in Denver last week where somebody on a bus shot another passenger on a city bus. We're going to tell you why he shot him and how old the shooter was. You didn't hear that story, did you?
I did not.
Well, and you can figure out why you didn't hear it. We'll also talk about the Kansas City parade shooting. We're going to tell you who was responsible that left one person dead and 22 wounded, and why that story has died an incredibly quick death. We'll tell you why the $360 million judgment against Donald Trump was handed down by a New York State judge last week was unwarranted and politically motivated. We have a column from Real Clear Politics on that topic. And our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from Harris County, Texas, where a man was sleeping in his truck in the parking lot of the complex, in his apartment complex. We'll tell you why he was sleeping in his truck and the mistake an armed thug made when he broke into the guy's truck that he was sleeping in at 3 o'clock in the morning. So that sound like an intriguing list of things to talk about?
Sounds like an awful lot to get through in a half hour.
All right, we'll try to run. So, all right, so here's Senator Joseph Biden. I didn't play the audio. I could play the audio, but here's his quote. This is Senator Joseph Biden. This is a direct word for word quote. He said, quote, "I am convinced that a criminal who wants a firearm can get one through illegal, untraceable, and unregistered sources with or without gun control." Now, you and I both know that to be a fact. And apparently at one time he knew that to be a fact. Yep. But apparently he doesn't know that anymore. So was he lying then, or is he lying now? What do you think, producer?
I mean, he was right before when he said that, because it's absolutely 100% true.
Right, and I think Kansas City shooting is a classic example, and actually the Denver shooting as well are both examples
So
that.
I think the all the facts in the Kansas, they're being very secretive with the facts in the Kansas City shooting, but from what I can gather thus far, it was maybe juveniles, and juveniles, if that's the case, did not get those guns legally.
That's correct. They were both
And there was a gentleman on the news, I can't remember who it was, they interviewed, to say, he said regarding the Kansas City shooting that we need more gun laws. Well, guess what? Those guns were obtained illegally.
right. Two teenagers are not allowed to purchase or possess. Now, by the way, if you're a parent, you can take a teenager with you to a shooting range.
Mhm.
And if you are supervising and if you're the legal guardian, you can, at a shooting range, supervise, a minor, can shoot a gun at a shooting range, but a minor cannot walk around in possession of a handgun. And we actually now have some information. It wasn't an AK-47. It was two 9mm pistols. And I can even tell you which one was a Glock and one was a Taurus. It wasn't an AK-47, but we'll get to that later on. All right, you ready to pick the stupidest thing I've heard all week?
Yeah, let's hear my choices.
All right. Now, in California, this is not a U.S. congresswoman. This is a state congresswoman. Her name is Barbara Lee. She's running for re-election in that state. And she has renewed her proposal to raise the minimum wage in California to $50 an hour. Not 15, 50. Because, well, that's what you need to pay rent in this, in her district. Now, what do you think would happen to rents if in that state, if that proposal became law?
The rents would increase.
Right, and here's it. So let's say right now there's a fine. She's talking about these apartments that cost 1,800 to 2,000 a month. Now, there's a finite supply of those apartments that cost 1,800 to 2,000 a month, and the reason there's a finite supply is that the supply of that class of apartment equals the demand, because if the demand exceeded, developers would build more. Now, if suddenly everybody in the state could afford an $1,800 to $2,000 a month apartment, and the apartment owners had 3 times as many potential renters as apartments, what do you think they would do?
This is basic supply and demand.
They would raise the rent.
Yeah. When
You
the
wouldn't be
demand
able
is
to.
high, the rent's going to go high.
Right. I mean, if you've got 3 times as many people want to rent your apartments than you have apartments, they would no longer be 18 to $2,000 a month apartments. The
Yeah.
rents would go up. So it's the inflationary spiral. So that's stupid nominee number one.
Well, with that, I gotta say, Jersey Joe, I think you owe me a raise because that's more than I make.
Yeah, that's 100,000,
104,000.
$104,000 a year. And she wants everybody, including those people who flip burgers at McDonald's, to make
Yeah,
$104,000 a year. So that's
you
our
owe me
stupid
a raise, Jersey Joe.
number one. Okay. So our second contender comes to us from New York City, where a woman was scammed out of $50,000 in cash. And I'm going to play an audio clip of how that happened. And when you hear what this woman does for a living, this is what makes it so stupid. So here we go. Hang on.
Experience of falling victim to an elaborate phone scam. It ultimately led to her putting $50,000 in a shoebox and then handing it over to the scammers.
Yeah, she has now gone viral after sharing her story with New York Magazine. She says it all started with a call she thought was from Amazon, but it was actually from crooks spinning an elaborate and fictional tale. Here's Eyewitness News reporter Lindsay Tuckman. It couldn't happen to me, or maybe it could. That's the message Prospect Heights resident Charlotte Cowles is sharing after phone scam artists convinced her to give them tens of thousands of dollars. I thought that I would never fall for something like this. Cowles, a columnist for New York Magazine's The Cut, wrote this now viral article. The day I put $50,000 in a shoebox and handed it to a stranger. It unfolded very gradually and incrementally over 5 hours on the phone. Back in October, scammers called her, first pretending to be with Amazon, saying her account was compromised. She then got transferred to someone claiming to be with the Federal Trade Commission, telling her she was a victim of identity fraud.
That led to a fake CIA agent saying a warrant was out for her arrest, and she had to withdraw $50,000 from her bank to protect her assets. Don't tell anyone. Everyone is a suspect, the phony agent told her.
They're very good at targeting people, figuring out their one specific vulnerability. They had very intimate details about me, about my family members. They knew where I lived. They knew the last four digits of my social security number. They knew about my son. And it was terrifying.
According to the FTC, however, scammers posing as government agents is common, and Americans lost a total of $2.7 billion just last year to these kinds of hustles. The NYPD even sharing videos telling New Yorkers officials will not call to request money, just hang up.
Charlotte did file a police report. The scam still under investigation. Her hope, though, while she won't get the money back, is to prevent others from being swindled like her.
Now, I have to add this. Now, they mentioned that she was a columnist for a magazine, right?
Mhm.
You know what kind of columnist she was?
Economics columnist.
She wrote she was a financial advice column. She writes a financial advice column and she put $50,000 in a shoebox and handed it to a stranger. So is it the woman who wants to raise the minimum wage to $50 an hour in California, or is it
You know,
the-
these scams and these scam artists are getting so elaborate and just they're getting out of control, and people really need to be cautious. So I can't fault her. I got to go with the woman in California who wants to raise the minimum wage to $50 an hour.
You know, if this was a 60-year-old woman, you know, I could maybe understand it, or this was a widow, but this woman writes a financial advice
Yeah.
column. All right. Well, we'll let the viewers decide, but so you're going to go with the congresswoman in Barbara Lee who wants to raise the minimum wage to $50
Yeah.
an hour. We'll let other people vote, but to me, it's one thing if you're a widow or whatever, but if you write a financial advice column and you put $50,000 in a shoebox and hand it to somebody you never met, I don't know.
Mhm. Yep.
Anyway, so we got your vote. I think I got to go with the woman who put 50,000 in a shoebox. Let's see what the listeners think. All right. So in keeping again, this is another gun story. So Ohio 2 years ago went to constitutional carry. Again, anybody, if they qualify, and again, you have to be a citizen, no felon, and not under no restraining order. You don't have to get a piece of paper from the state saying that you meet those requirements. Well, let me tell you what happened. So after the state made it legal for qualifying, and the key word is qualifying residents to carry concealed weapon without a state issue permit, Columbus, Ohio, which is the capital, had a record number of homicides the year before in 2021. Before the law went into effect, they had 202 homicides. In 2022, the year that the law went into effect, that tally decreased. You want to guess how much it decreased from 202 down to what? You want to take a guess?
I want to go with about 50%. I'm going to go with 100.
Very close. It went down to 138. That is a dramatic drop. They went from 202 down to 138. Now, the Attorney General said in a press release he commissioned the study because several Ohio mayors had asserted that the change in state law would cause gun crimes to rise in their cities. And what did that study show? It showed the mayors were wrong. And here's what happened in 6 of the largest cities in Ohio. Columbus, we just talked, was down by 40%. Cleveland down by 6%. Toledo, Ohio down by 18%. Akron down by 18%. Parma down by 22%. Canton 5%. And the other 2 cities were flat or had like a single-digit increase. So a dramatic drop once they went to permitless carry. So once again, the Democrats in the legislature and the mayors of those cities have been proven wrong. And by the way, this is not unique to Ohio. Again, they became the 26th state to go with this. And there has been no
more than half the country.
More than half the country now has what's called constitutional carry. Anyway, so are you surprised by that outcome, or?
No, not at all.
Okay. And by the way, in Pennsylvania where you are, they don't have permitless carry, but it's so easy, it might as well be permitless carry, right?
Yeah, it is super easy to get a permit in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, you can't be a convicted felon or anything like that.
Right.
But you go down to the sheriff's office, you pay your $20 and you walk out 15 minutes later with your permit, assuming that, again, you're not a felon or
Right.
anything.
Did they take a fingerprint or they take your picture? Are you still there?
No, they did not fingerprint me. And as a matter of fact, they take my photograph, do not take my fingerprints. And I'll tell you, they did. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. No, I get this.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Hello?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Okay,
I can. Anyway.
I can hear you.
All right. So,
Okay. In picture, but no fingerprints, and they did not call my references.
yeah, same with me. I applied for an out-of-state permit and they took my picture, but no fingerprints, and they didn't check my references. All right. So let's talk about this Harvard professor. Guy named Professor Roland Fryer, by the way, who was a black man. He was intrigued because all these claims about that cops tend to shoot black suspects more frequently than they shoot white suspect. So he took Houston, Texas, big city, one of the big top 10 cities in the United States. And the police had, they had an excellent data collection system. So he did a study, and here's what he found. He said his study showed there was not only no racial differences in the rate of officer-involved shootings, he said, and all hell broke loose, and his life was upended after he published the study. Fryer said many of the complaints, he began receiving the threats and complaints within 4 minutes after the publication. And the first one was, "You're full of shit," the center said. Fryer quickly said people lost their minds, and some of his colleagues refused to believe the results after months of asking him not to print the data. I had colleagues take me to the side and say, "Don't publish this, you'll ruin your career." The world-renowned economist knew from the comments by the faculty that he was likely to garner backlash. Fryer admitted that he anticipated the results of the study would be different and would confirm suspicions of no racial bias against minorities. When the results found no racial bias, Fryer then hired 8 new assistants and redid the study. And when they redid the study with 8 new research assistants, the data came back the same. By the way, and here's what the data showed. The study data showed that officers were 23.8% less likely, 23% less likely to shoot at black suspects and 8.5% less likely to shoot at Hispanics than they were to shoot at whites. So the group that was shot at most frequently were white suspects. And the group that were least likely to be shot at were black suspects. And the academic world in which he lived in hated that study because they wanted to keep the myth alive that cops shoot blacks, that there's racial bias within the police fraternity, and that they shoot black suspects. So he did the study twice, first by himself, and then with the help of 8 new assistants, and it came back with the identical data. What's your reaction?
And did you say at the beginning of this segment that, to clarify, this professor was a black professor?
Black Harvard professor.
Okay.
And again, he did the study not once, but twice. And within 4 minutes of publishing, he was getting hate mail from his colleagues saying, "You're basically full of shit."
I know, Jerzee Joe, at the beginning of every year, you review the previous year's statistics from the FBI.
Yep.
And his data aligns with those FBI findings that you review every single year for the last, you've been doing it for many years.
Yep. Again, the biggest threat to the life of a black man is not a police officer, it's another black man. 56, African Americans make up 12.5% of the population. They make up 56% of all homicide victims, and 97% of the and by the way, not every assailant is known, because some of these they never know who did the shooting. But when they do identify who the shooter was, in 97% of the time, it is another black man. So the biggest threat to the life of a black man in this country today is not the police, it's another black man. All right, you want to move on to the man who got shot and killed on a bus in Denver?
Yeah, what happened in Denver? I didn't hear this.
Okay, well, this is a quote from a linked story out of the Denver Post. What began as an alleged argument over a passenger's leg protruding into the aisle of a Denver city bus ended with, now listen carefully, A 13-year-old being arrested on 14 charges, including first-degree murder. Police responded to a shooting around 6:30 p.m. on January 27th on a city bus. Richard Sanchez had been shot multiple times and later died from his injuries at a nearby hospital, according to the Denver Police Department. The trio sat towards the back of the bus. Sanchez, the shooter was part of a group of 3 juveniles. Sanchez then approached the juveniles, continuing the verbal altercation that had begun about a leg sticking into the aisle. The suspect then allegedly, remember, the 13-year-old suspect then allegedly pulled a handgun and fired approximately, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 7 rounds at Sanchez, hitting him as he fell to the floor. The teens then fled out the back of the bus when it stopped. Through the surveillance camera footage on the bus, police were able to identify the suspect with the help of the teens' high school. Now, note, the 13-year-old didn't just shoot the guy once, emptied the gun 7 times. First of all, what's a 13-year-old doing running around with a gun? And what made him decide to shoot the guy 7 times? Wouldn't the first 2 or 3 be enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't do the whole story. As a relievant, another one of his buddies, also about the same age, also pulled out and flashed a gun at the driver of the bus.
And
So
obviously these juveniles, 13-year-olds, did not obtain these guns legally.
Right.
So additional laws is not going to prevent them from getting
they broke
these
every law in the
guns.
books, including the law against murder. And by the way, I think we did a taxpayer relief shot 6 months ago where in Denver, a guy had his truck stolen, but he had one of these Apple AirTags, and he went and found his truck. And when he found his truck, there was a 12-year-old sitting in it, and the 12-year-old pulled out a gun and started shooting at him. I believe it was 2 o'clock in the morning. So what's a 12-year-old doing sitting in a stolen truck at 2 in the morning? And where are his parents? That your 12-year-old's out stealing cars armed with a loaded handgun. Anyway, so going back to Joe Biden's quote, yes, these 2 incidences right here, Kansas City and the Denver bus shooting, are proof that what Joe Biden said in 1985 is correct. A criminal, no gun law is going to stop a criminal from getting a gun. All right.
And you just asked a question too, and I can't remember the guy's name or the specifics of the incident, but it was in the news just recently about where the boy's parents, about that mother who was just charged because the son did the killing, and the father's about to go on trial coming up here in the next couple weeks.
I think it was Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, nor do I want to give him
the
any.
name was Crowley or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to give him any additional media coverage, but the fact that the mother has been charged and the father's about to go on trial.
Right. And they said, well, because dad bought the son the handgun for him to quote use, even though he wasn't the legal owner. And dad left the loaded handgun in a drawer where his son knew it was and could be accessed by his son. So yeah, and they were told that the son had met. In fact, they called on the day of the shooting. They called the mother, said, "Come get your boy. He's making threats." And she said, "No, I'm leaving him here." And a few hours later, that's the very same day, he pulled out the gun that he had with him the whole time and started shooting and killing his classmates. So that's why she's being charged, because she refused to take him home and take action, even though she was notified. And dad's going to be charged because he allowed him to have access to a loaded gun. So we will see.
Yeah, I mean, this trial has just set precedents.
Yes, it's setting precedent. And I think in this case, they clearly, they contributed to the homicide. It's called negligent homicide. They were negligent in not preventing, in not. By the way, but which brings it. So, do you think the parents of the 13-year-old on the bus or the 2 minors in Kansas City, do you think those parents are going to get charged?
Doubtful.
Doubtful. So is there a double standard?
I don't think that they will, but there's certainly new precedents.
So let's move on to Kansas City. So one of the stories that died a very quick death. By the way, when the shooter is a white male with an AR-15, it's news for a week, right? This story lasted less than a day and a half, because as soon as it was announced that there was no AR-15, there was no white guy, no white Christian male, it was 2 juveniles. And by the way, they announced today, a couple hours ago, that one had a Glock handgun, the other had a Taurus 9mm handgun. They started spraying bullets at each other. They're both juveniles. The police have released the names of the suspect, but there's no pictures been released. But there are pictures of these two individuals being handcuffed, and they're both young black men in hoodies, yeah, juveniles. So somebody snapped a cell phone picture, and then I Googled the names, and I found a picture of one of them. He was I forget why his picture was up, but they're two young juvenile black men, each one carrying a gun, and they just decided they got into an argument and started shooting at each other, wounded 22 people, killing one. Now I wonder if those parents are going to get charged. But it's amazing how quickly these mass shooting stories die when the shooter isn't a white male with an AR-15. Any thoughts on how quickly they die?
Yeah, and here was another. There was it's so how the media and bystanders are so quick to judge. There was a black man who was arrested for it was drunk and disorderly, but he was immediately labeled as the shooter.
Right, and then he was
The poor
quickly,
man's life
yeah,
has been ruined, and he had nothing to do with the shooting at all.
right, yeah, nothing to do with
But his photo went viral, and the man's life is ruined. Yeah, he was arrested for like drunk and disorderly, nothing to do with the shooting.
nothing to do with the shooting, but yeah, they ruined his life. Hopefully they can recover. All right, you want to move on to something that doesn't have anything to do with guns? Can you hear me?
Yeah, let's change the topic here.
All right. So
Yes, let's change the topic here.
Everything we heard last week that Trump was ordered to pay a $355 million judgment, which he has appealed. And I think he may win his appeal, because here's an article out of Real Clear Politics, which is not a right-wing publication. They're kind of nonpartisan. Now, this is a story. They say Justice Engoron's opinion in the civil action brought by Attorney General Letitia James is premised on the idea that Trump fraudulently obtained lower rates on money he borrowed by offering lenders recourse to more of his assets, some of which he allegedly overstated. And Engoron glosses over the most salient facts of the case. There was no victim, and he does so in a decidedly schoolmarmish preface. And here's a quote: "Timely and total repayment of loans does not extinguish the harm that false statements inflict on the marketplace." Well, wait a minute, what harm? He paid back the loans on time with interest. So where is the harm? Without bothering to do much explaining regarding that expansive and novel theory, the judge added, "Here, despite false financial statements, it is undisputed that defendants have made all required payments on time." So even the judge acknowledged that Trump made all the payments on time and the loans were fully repaid. So then, is a $355 million fine for inflating the size of his portfolio? It makes one wonder what the judge would have ordered if Trump had actually defaulted on those loans. Would the judge have ordered summary execution? A little sarcasm there, but again, by the way, I've been involved in many business loans in my life, for different companies. You always apply for loan, and the lender asks you to state your assets and list your approximate value or the value you believe, and then the banks always come and they do their own audit. I've been involved where we've submitted list of assets, vehicles, equipment, and the banks hire an appraiser, and they come back and say, "Well, our professional appraiser disagrees with your assessment, and here's what we're going to base the loan on," and which is exactly what Trump's bank did. They said, "Thank you very much for listing these assets and these properties, but we're going to assign our own value," which is what they did. So same thing if you go to get a home equity loan on your house. You can say, well, when you apply for the loan, they're going to ask you, well, what do you believe your house is worth? And you tell them, and they'll basically say, well, if you're correct, then you would qualify for this big of a loan, X loan. But they don't just take your word for it. They send an appraiser out to your house. And that's exactly what the bank did. So the judge, clearly had an agenda. And anyway, it's being appealed. I think he stands an excellent chance of winning his appeal. Any thoughts on that opinion piece or the judge's ruling? Did I lose you again?
Yeah, no, we've made it clear that. No, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. All right.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. All right.
Hello?
I can hear you. Anyway,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So if you can't hear me, I'm just going to keep on going and recording.
We've got a lot of technical problems tonight.
I keep getting this message, unstable.
We've got a lot of technical problems tonight.
We have. All right. So if I can't hear, I'm just going to finish up. Our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from Harris County, Texas, where a man was sleeping in his truck because he had an argument with his wife. They lived in an apartment. So he decided to go out and sleep in his truck. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, since we're running out of time, I'm not even going to play on why we call him a taxpayer relief shot. But here's what happens at 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, hang on.
About a shooting overnight. They said a man was sleeping in his truck when a suspect broke into the truck. So the sleeping man shot the suspect multiple times. ABC 13's Courtney Carpenter has the details from the apartment complex where this all happened on Parramatta in North Harris County.
Investigators tell us this man was sleeping in the back of his truck after having a fight with his girlfriend. The suspected burglar opened the truck door and got more than he bargained for. Just after 3 this morning, the sheriff's office headed out to the Mirabella apartments on Parramatta Lane after a man called in saying he had just shot someone.
The decedent was apparently burglarizing a number of vehicles in the parking lot, climbed into the reportee's pickup truck. The reportee was armed with a AR-15 rifle.
The sheriff's office says the burglary suspect was in his 20s, had a Glock pistol in his pocket and a large screwdriver they believe he used to break into 3 or 4 other cars before breaking into the black truck that he didn't know someone was in.
So he was sleeping in the back seat of the trucks, and the windows are heavily tinted. So he did not realize that the truck was occupied until he actually was sitting in the truck.
The burglary suspect was shot several times and died on the scene. We're told the man who was sleeping in his truck and fired the shots is cooperating with the investigation, and this case will be referred to a grand jury. Reporting in North Harris County, Courtney Carpenter, ABC 13, Eyewitness News.
So what do you think of that one? Did you hear the whole thing? Were you able to hear the whole thing? All right. I think we lost.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to put the link to that story up on the website because we're having some technical. Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties. So
yeah, I keep getting these messages, unstable Wi-Fi or unstable internet connection. All right, we'll put it up anyway. Guy has a fight with his girlfriend, decides to go sleep in his truck. 3 in the morning, some armed thug with a screwdriver and a pistol breaks in, and the guy happened to have his AR-15 in the back seat with him. So that was the end of the thug. Anyway, Producer Susan, I'm going to sign off while we still have a signal here. I want to thank you for listening. If you have any questions, comments, you want to vote on the stupidest thing I've heard all week, just email it to me at joe@jerzeejoe.com. That's JERZ as in zebra, jerzeejoe.com. You can find this podcast or you can post comments to the website at jerzeejoe.com. And with that, I will sign off while we still have an internet connection. Anything you want to add before we close, Producer Susan? All right. If not, I'm going to end the show. Here we go. Bye-bye.